We're just hitting live now, Your Worship. You're live, Your Worship.
Thank you. All right, Council, I'd like to call this regular council meeting of September 27, 2022 to order with adoption of the agenda. Someone want to make that motion for me? Councillor Elliott, Councillor Charlotte, all in favor? Motion's carried. Adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting of September 6th. Someone want to make that motion? Councillor Elliott, Councillor Brooks-Hill, all in favor? Motion carried. Any business arising from the council minutes? So it said September 6th, and then business arising from regular council meeting of today. So yeah, September 6th. Any business arising? Councillor Elliott.
In that last session, we've had a presentation by Adrian about the tiny homes.
Mm-hmm.
One of the asks, or one of the recommendations, that they were asking for land, which I'm not particularly in favor of giving city land to designate a specific number of users. But the real problem I have, and the question I asked, is does the city zoning allow tiny homes? Because if that's the hang up, then that's a different discussion we need to have. Because personally, I'm in favor of the tiny home movement and what people want to live in. But if we don't have that in our bylaws or in our regulations pertaining to it, then we're just talking the wrong thing.
I appreciate that comment, because that's where our city staff are looking at it, and basically we'll look at some alternatives. I had some information given to me when we were at UBCM, so I'm going to discuss that with staff, and then the staff will bring that, look at that and see if it's worthwhile bringing to council. So does anyone know what the hang up is? I mean, other communities are embracing it. Mr. Simon, any comment on Mr. Elliott's concerns?
Through your worship, the largest challenge with tiny homes right now, as they'd be referred to, is compliance with applicable code regulations. So predominantly being the BC building code. So right now, a tiny home is just a single family dwelling. Our only definition that's included in single family dwelling in the zoning bylaw is that the home must be on a permanent continuous foundation. So if someone can build something on a permanent continuous foundation that complies with BC building code, then that would be permitted as per the current rules of the zoning bylaw. The other challenge is when people want to put homes on wheels, then it becomes something that comes under, it's called CSA standards. And then we have a temporary building that would have historically been something like a RV or a fifth wheel that's being pulled around that now someone wants to use for permanent occupation. That becomes a challenge from a zoning perspective as well as a building code perspective. So the real challenge when it comes to tiny homes, from my view, isn't so much the zoning. The zoning can be sorted out. All it is a small single family dwelling on a small lot. It really comes down to owners and applicants being able to demonstrate compliance with applicable provincial code regulations.
Well, I mean, RV parks, there's a plethora of them on the outskirts of town. And I think the KOA campground petitioned to put a section of their land into these RV.
You're going to see that in front of you in a moment.
Yeah, oh, okay. But again, those were opportunities to establish a tiny home village, and we somehow have missed it, or it's gotten delayed along the way. So I'm just saying those possibilities are there. Other people are addressing them. I mean, go to Downey Loop and you've got an RV tiny home village if you want to qualify it. So that's effectively what we could have in a certain zone in our town. So that's my take.
Good. All right. Appreciate the comments. All right. Any other business arising from the minutes? Saying none, I am going to move on to item 5A. Does someone want to put that motion on the table? And then I'll ask Mr. Simon if he has a brief presentation. Councilor Brooks-Hill.
The development variance permit DBP 2022-005 be approved as in the package to allow the rear yard setback to be reduced from 7.5 meters to 4.5 meters, subject to as in the package.
Okay, with the lots being consolidated. Mr. Simon, any comments or presentation on this motion?
Through your worship, no formal presentation from staff, but I would like to introduce Ms. Komars, who's our assistant planner, who is the file manager for this application. She's been in council once before, so this is her second time, and she is here to answer any questions that council may have on the subject file.
All right, thank you. Welcome, Ms. Komars. Appreciate you being here. And so just for clarification, we're doing this entire motion as one. Is that correct, Ms. Floyd?
Yes, your worship, it is.
Thank you for that. All right, council, any comments? This is a property at 202 9th Street, redevelopment of that property with some minimum yard dimensions and setbacks, and then consolidating. Are we consolidating two lots there, Ms. Komars?
That's a condition of this development variance permit moving forward, is the consolidation of 2 lots, correct?
All right, thank you. Appreciate that. Any comments from council regarding this? Councilor Sherlock.
Just a comment of appreciation for the staff to be able to come up with a variance like this, especially when we're protecting those old mature trees. That really helps with a variety of benefits for the community. So I think allowing for a variance that will, from the looks of things, stay pretty close to what was already existing. Is that correct?
Correct.
So protecting those trees, I think, is a good move. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments from council? Councilor Burkshill.
I think we just received the one public comment from a neighbor. So just some clarity in the drawings or in the report, there's that section with the parking removed. I'm just wondering if we could get some clarification on.
Any comment on that?
Yeah, thank you. We worked with the applicant in regards to where the location of their driveway was. Originally, in current context, is the driveway is off 9th Street. They'll be removing that driveway off 9th Street, and they will be in the building permit to be approved if this DVP is approved, creating context and orientation into their building off of Orton. So I think that there might be a bit of confusion there, as the entrance into the new driveway will be off Orton Street, not off the laneway, and the garage will be an attached garage to the proposed building. Yeah, thank you, Your Worship.
Great, thank you, Ms. Komars. Any other comments or questions? So I've read over both of these letters and understand some are in a distance. I'm not sure why the second letter is there. It doesn't seem to be all that close to this property, a block and a half away, but definitely appears to be, as Councilor Budd has said, something that's suitable for the lot, and I'm quite appreciative of what staff have come up with and supportive of this. So I'll ask one last time, if there are no other questions regarding this motion, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Note the motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Komars. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Moving on to announcements from the mayor. I just want to congratulate Arts Revelstoke for an incredible Luna. 3 days of fun. It was really wonderful to see all the art. It's amazing the talent we have in this community, and wonderful to see that. My pleasure to be able to speak to unveiling of the Isabel Corsair statue and meet some of the family. It was a wonderful event, I think, for the entire community. It was amazing how many people were here from outside the community, wanted to experience Luna. So I was really tickled by that. Also want to say congratulations and thank you to 2 staff members who are moving on. So Tanya McCabe has retired from the city of Revelstoke and moved on to Okanagan Regional District, I believe, or South Okanagan Regional District. So I want to thank Tanya for her 14 years with the city, and wish her all the best as she moves on in her career. And thank you to Tony Murray. Tony's been with us 7 years, been a long-time resident here in Revelstoke, 7 years with the city. He is retiring this week as well. And just want to say thanks, Tony, for all that you've done He's been a night foreman on snow removal and then our building maintenance person as well. So just appreciate everything Tony's done and wish him well as he and his family move on to the Okanagan. So moving on to item 9A bylaw. Someone want to put that motion on the table, please? Tax exemption bylaw, Councillor Ryan.
That the 2023 property tax exemption bylaw number 2344 be adopted.
Councillor Charlotte seconding. Any questions or comments on this bylaw? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to 9. Table, and then we can have brief discussion. Councillor Charlotte.
That zoning amendment bylaw number 2345 be read a first and second time.
Seconder for the motion. Councillor Brooks Hill. Mr. Simon, any comments on this motion regarding 1121 Johnson Heights?
Through your worship, so this is an application for rezoning a portion of the subject property. It's currently zoned rural residential 60 hectare zone, which is an old zone that's been embedded from previous bylaws when these lands were all annexed in from the CSRD. That would have been in the 80s. So that zoning has remained ever since that time. And the applicant has applied to rezone a portion of it to the R2 district, which would permit both single detached as well as 2-unit dwellings on the subject property. Now, this is part of a larger comprehensive development proposal that would see multi-unit residential constructed on the remainder of the property. And given where we are at with respect to the Johnson Heights neighborhood plan, and you will notice that this application has, it is an older application from 2018. Staff have been trying to work with the applicant pending completion of the forward for initial council consideration in advance of the Johnson Heights neighborhood plan, which will continue to be worked on in the background.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or concerns that you would like to note to Mr. Simon? Councillor Elliott.
So Paul, you mentioned that there is the comprehensive plan that's being undertaken and ongoing. I'm glad we're finally making this gentleman's, we're moving ahead on this, something for this, the gentleman, or people that own the property. It's been a long time they've been in limbo for quite some time, trying to make something happen on the property involved. Whatever happened to the man camp issue on that? Did that just fall apart? Because that was the same parcel, right?
Through your worship, just to clarify to Councillor Elliott, are you referring to the proposal from Revelstoke Mountain Resort on the subject property for employee housing?
Yeah. I think there was an uproar on the use of that property at the time, and I just wanted there's been no resolution or no information that we've been circus fed or informed on.
So through your worship to Councillor Elliott, so as council approved that temporary use permit for 2 years, the situation did not ultimately work out for the proposed user of the site, and it was determined that they were going to look for alternative options. Now, with that, one of the big concerns that council may recall from the quasi hearing on the temporary use permit was with respect to traffic concerns. So with this particular proposal, there's no secret Johnson Heights is it's a great area to potentially facilitate some residential development, but there are major infrastructure constraints. One of the most glaring ones obviously being transportation. So with this proposal, we have worked with both the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure as well as the applicant to ensure that a transportation solution, a comprehensive solution, would be provided for in advance of any construction on site.
The whole comprehensive issue, that whole zone up there was, I think I've commented in the past that we're waiting on these various other elements to get their plan together before you can make a comprehensive plan. Is that still the problem? Because this gentleman's been waiting to go for quite some time, and everyone else is just trying to get their head in, figure out what's viable. So we've been hanging him up at the expense of everyone else getting their head clear. And that's kind of an unfortunate situation.
So through your worship to Councillor Elliott, certainly this plan, it was actually initiated before my time with the city. several months before is kind of when it got started. And I think it started out with great intentions, started as a theory, which is, a developer funded neighborhood plan. So all the developers in the area are going to contribute and see this great neighborhood plan come to fruition. In practice, that becomes very, very challenging when you actually start having the bills roll in for the completion of the neighborhood plan, as well as the technical studies that need to be completed to support the neighborhood plan. So most of the other developers that have been, were originally showing interest have fallen by the wayside, and this is the primary developer within the area. Now, that said, staff are still planning to move forward with the neighborhood plan. It's just a matter of sequencing. We needed the OCP to be adopted to give a general land use strategy for the area. And then now that we have that OCP adopted, which was identified by council as a priority, so that's where the staff resources went to, we will be looking at advancing that Johnson Heights neighborhood plan to provide that comprehensive vision for how this area can develop in the future. And staff, I will note, with this particular phase coming forward in advance of that plan, staff have worked very diligently with the applicant to make sure that this approval would not compromise the viability of the overall intent of that neighborhood plan. So there's been work that's been happening kind of concurrently to try and get this application through.
Yeah, and I understand that, Paul, and I think it's great that you guys are progressing, but it's just an unfortunate precedent to set where we are held hostage to the whole world here trying to get things figured out. But you've got an idea on your plate right now, and he's willing to spend money, and we're just 5 years down the road, we're making a decision, and that's something, a precedent we don't want to set or keep in place.
Great, appreciate the comment. Councillor Ryan and Councillor Palmer, please.
Is the connection of Johnson Heights to the city without going through the highway something that is a DCC project on our list already, or will it be added?
Through your worship, it's not a list that's current on our current DCC project. Whether or not it would be added as a DCC project is something that would need to be evaluated as the city moves forward with updating the DCC bylaw. So as we're working to get all of our master plans in place that the engineering services department is working on, that would help identify a new comprehensive list of DCC projects. And then we would bring forward a DCC bylaw for council consideration that would outline how we're going to fund those projects. In the event that it does become a DCC project, and let's say in theory this developer upfronts the cost of it, then they would be entitled for future DCC credits as they continue with their development.
That's really cool. Thanks. Just to follow up, if that's all right. So the master plans that would include or be able to put this in the project list, would it be the transportation plan in this case? The master transportation plan?
Mr. Black?
Thank you, Your Worship, to Councillor Ryan. Yes, that is correct. And I would like to note that we shall be presenting a draft of this plan to council in the next few days, week. And so I'm very pleased with the findings of that. Not that that has anything to do with this report, but yes.
Appreciate that. All right, Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Question to the planner, just on the public consultation, like this is a pretty significant development, and I agree with Councillor Elliott that it's good that we're finally moving along on it. The question I have is on the public consultation. Can you review what, if and what public consultation on the whole Johnson Heights and the development, including the connectivity to the city that's occurred to date? I don't need a lot of detail, but if you could just give a brief overview of that.
Mr. Simon?
Through your worship, I will note some of it I believe was initially undertaken in advance of my time, but from my understanding, there has been some general engagement that's been undertaken with the community to help inform the overall land use concept for the Johnson Heights area. And I believe that engagement included a survey on Talk Revelstoke that would have happened during COVID, where in-person engagement became challenging. And I know that there has been basically, I don't know if you want to call them charrettes or kind of focus group meetings, more so with targeted stakeholders being some of the main property developers within the area. I was involved in a couple of those when I had started very early on at the city. As we move forward with the Johnson Heights neighborhood plan, there would be an opportunity for greater engagement as we get that plan closer to being in final draft form. And then with this particular application, staff, even though there is certainly the argument that it is aligned with the OCP, staff are not recommending waiving the public hearing, and we are recommending to hold the public hearing for this particular rezoning.
Thank you again through the mayor. Yeah, I appreciate that and the importance of, especially in this case, the importance of a public hearing because it's so significant. It's disappointing from many perspectives. This is not reflective on the planning department, just sort of disappointing where it's been. The neighborhood plan before my time was to be a priority. It didn't get done for various reasons. And so there's that cart and horse aspect. The other thing that, and maybe actually these comments are just sort of general for council. One of the concerns that I have is on the activity of making sure that the public is fully engaged. And here we're right down to the last few weeks or couple weeks of this council term. And I'll speak a little bit more to that on the actual public hearing date. But in general, because of the need to get moving, I'm supportive of the motion that's on the table. Thank you, Mayor Sulz.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Brooks-Hill.
I definitely support this motion for a variety of reasons. The delay is unfortunate. But in terms of public consultation with this project, I feel like this council has heard from Johnson Heights with the neighborhood planning and also with that previous application for the man camp that, their major concern is to do with safety of being able to get in and out of the neighborhood. Yeah. And I'm really pleased that no occupancy will be issued until something is done to address that, whether that's a connection from Oak Drive to Townley or some sort of upgrade at the highway, which, to some degree, that's just going to be the Ministry of Transportation that's making that decision. That's a bit out of the city's hands, but I feel confident that something is going to be done at least. And that allows me to support this.
Okay, Councillor Charlotte.
I'll echo my fellow councillors' comments that it's nice to see the director or the Ministry of Transportation at the table in this case. It sounded like they weren't too enthusiastic about changes to the highway in the past. So the fact that they're involved at this level gives me hope that we might finally get to improve the access to that community. It does take development to help push that along. So this looks like a good fit. I'm looking forward to hearing that from the community.
Great. Councillor Palmer, did you have another comment?
Just a comment, I guess, regarding the Ministry of Transportation. That is a requirement, so they have to be involved with it. But that's good points. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Palmer? Thank you.
Yes, aye.
Appreciate that. So the motion has been passed. Moving on to item 9B2. Someone want to put that on the Councillor Charlotte.
That a public hearing for zoning amendment bylaw number 2345 be scheduled on October 25th, 2022 in accordance with the Local Government Act.
Second for the motion, Councillor Ryan. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Brooks-Hill.
I have a question regarding the timing of this public hearing. Is this the type of bylaw that we could do third reading and pass?
Mr. Simon, comment?
Through your worship, at the conclusion of the public hearing, it would be at council's discretion whether or not to give third reading and adopt the bylaw that day. So under the Local Government Act, you should be able to do that. And I believe Ms. Floyd would be able to correct me right now if I'm wrong, but it can all be done in the same day.
Okay. Councillor Palmer. Ms. Floyd, you want to speak?
No, I'm fine. Mr. Simon was correct.
All right, thank you. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. So just through to council on the timing with the election and for the ability for the public to be engaged in a public hearing, if we are genuinely interested in having what the public has to say. I'm questioning the appropriateness of doing this just before the end of our term. And so I guess I just sort of seriously question that. And why could not the new council be making the final decisions on this? And I'd appreciate just sort of comments from my fellow councillors on to whether they feel that the timing of this is appropriate or not.
Comment, Councillor Ryan.
When does it actually shift?
First.
Okay, yeah, I don't have any issue with it. I think if anything, it's nice to have the continuation since we know the back story of this, but yeah, I don't have any issues with it.
Mr. Simon, you had your hand up?
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry, I do not mean to interrupt. Ms. Rousseau just reminded me of something very important, that obviously the ministry needs to sign off on this bylaw. And you'll note in the report, there's one of two requirements that need to be satisfied to the ministry's satisfaction prior to the bylaw being signed off. So not so much related to the hearing, but I just wanted to correct my previous statement that it is unlikely that after the public hearing on the 25th, those requirements would be completed. So it's unlikely that council would be able to adopt the bylaw the same day.
Okay.
Just for that clarity. Sorry about that.
Good. Councillor Burksell, and I come back to Councillor Palmer.
So if that's the case, then I don't feel that this council should be doing the public hearing if the next council is going to be the one who's making the final decision.
Okay.
That's
Councillor Palmer?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Sulz. I would concur with Councillor Brooks-Hill, and I'm wondering through to Councillor Brooks-Hill if you would want to amend the motion to a later date or not, or just some. I'm trying to figure out a resolve to this without sort of holding things up as well.
So who put the motion on the table? Can it be refreshed on that, please? So Councillor Chalette,
I
can you?
think I put it on.
So you put it on, and Councillor Burksell, you seconded this motion?
I don't remember.
Okay, so can I go back to Ms. Rousseau as to who first moved
Your
in?
worship, Your Worship, Councillor Rind seconded the motion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chalette, Councillor Ryan. So do you want to mover and seconder to amend this motion to another date? Or do you want to go ahead with what's on the table?
I don't want to amend it.
Okay, Councillor Chalette.
I see the point of doing both. Like either one makes sense in some ways, but I can't see moving the public hearing to the first inaugural meeting. The first inaugural meeting of the new council. So it would at least be the end of November then for the public hearing. Now we're talking about a full month delay for a new group of people to make a decision on something that, as Councillor Ryan stated, we are more familiar with. If we're able to do third reading after the public hearing, then the decision, if I understand the process effectively, the decision will have effectively been made. The next council will simply adopt after all the paperwork is completed. Is that correct?
Confirmation on that, Ms. Floyd?
Sorry, Your Worship. The bylaw does need to go to the Ministry of Transportation for approval prior to adoption.
Okay, but we could do third reading after the public hearing, but adoption wouldn't take place until new council was in place then, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So does that answer your question?
It does, and it makes me feel confident that we, being familiar with the situation, familiar with the housing work we've been doing, could make any adjustments based on the public hearing for that third reading on the 25th, and then leave the next council to adopt after the paperwork's completed, but not delay the project by another month and possibly longer until the next council felt comfortable doing their first public hearing.
Okay. Councillor Palmer and then Councillor Brooksell.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. The concern that I have with the dialogue is it's sounding like we're making a charade of the public hearing process. So if we're genuinely open-minded to hearing the community, then there may be changes that after the public hearing. So we do first and second reading today, but after the public hearing, if we have an open mind, there will be potential changes to that. That's a kind of a critical component of public hearing process. So that's just one point. The second question, I guess, a question that I have through the corporate officer, if this council did make third reading, it goes to the ministry, comes back for adoption, the new council could the new council rescind third reading or start over again? Or what would happen in that case?
So Councillor Palmer, yes, the new council could rescind third reading. It would require a new public hearing. And then if the ministry approves it, we don't need to have them reapprove it unless it changes significantly.
Right. So in fairness to the public process, if we do that, if we rush this through before the election, there'll still be an opportunity for the new council to overturn any decisions this council makes.
That's correct, because the bylaw will not be adopted until then.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other comments on the motion on the table? Councillor Elliott.
I agree with the public engagement. I think Johnson Heights has had ample opportunity to make a statement on what they want in their neighborhood. The OCP has been touched upon, the neighborhood plan. They're one of the only neighborhoods that have got their plan resolved or somewhat well underway. I think I think this proponent has been on the bubble for a long time. I think it's time, if we can do anything, let's do him something to give him a carrot to make this all worthwhile. I'm not saying it's wrong. I just think he's providing something that we need in our community.
Okay. Councillor Brookshill.
I don't disagree with Councillor Elliott. I just feel that there's a chance that, there's a public hearing, this council requests changes, then the proponent goes back and does more work, comes back, the new council says, no, we like the first idea better. So to me, if we can't actually see it through, we should not be going to a public hearing and then expecting a new council who was maybe not at the original public hearing to be making that final decision. To me, it just doesn't, if we can't finish it, we shouldn't start it. And, I still have no problem with doing first and second reading because the new council, whoever's sitting around this table, can still see the same documents and go to the public hearing. I'm confident that this is aligning with our priorities and with the neighborhood plan and what they've asked for. So I'm confident in giving it first and second reading. But I think we should, I'll be voting against this motion to hold the public hearing. I'm not sure what happens if we vote down this.
Yep, so I'm going to ask that question. So we've already put first and second reading through. I'm going to go to Councillor Palmer because he has his hand up and he's been patient. So Councillor Palmer, and then I will go back to the corporate office.
Right. Thank you, Mayor Sulz. So based on, I just want to make it very clear. I'm supportive of it going to a public hearing. It's the timing that Councillor Brookshill is talking about is important because of the election and a new council that will ultimately be making the decision. Little bit conflicted, or quite a bit conflicted, because of the length of time the developer has had to wait for this. But in view of that the new council will ultimately be making the decision, I agree with Councillor Brookshill that the public hearing should be done during the term of the new council. They'll have a lot of work to learn a whole bunch of processes, but that's good. It happened with this council and it's happened to councils in the past. So based on that, I am going to propose or put a motion to amend the motion to schedule the public hearing after the new council is sworn in, and perhaps Councillor Brookshill would want to second that motion.
Okay, so motion on the table to amend this motion, setting the new public hearing till after the new council. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Brooks Hill is seconding that motion. Now, brief discussion on that motion. Is that correct? Proper proceedings to have a discussion on that? Right, go ahead. Councillor Palmer, I'll let you speak to it, and then I'll go to Councillor Ryan.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Sulz. Yeah, so I think I pretty much explained why the purpose behind the amending motion. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Ryan.
Yeah, I'm listening to my fellow councillors. I changed my mind. I think it makes sense if the developer is gonna have to ultimately be at risk of having to do more work, then that's silly. So this makes sense to me.
Okay. So just before I call the question on the amendment, Ms. Floyd, just for clarification, we don't need to set a date. It's just the first available time new council meets or second time new council meets for public hearing, or can you set something with Mr. Simon before we finalize this amendment?
So your worship, we don't need to set a date. I think historically council has liked that because it kind of closes the loop, but we can set it. We could set it for the first regular meeting in November if that's what council chose to do, or we could leave it open-ended and just add it and make sure that we advertise appropriately.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to go to Councillor Palmer and then I'm come back to Councillor Charlotte. Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Sulz. I intentionally left it ambiguous so that the new council could work with that. Whoever's at the mayor and the council is of the day can work with appropriate timing after the election. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Councillor Charlotte.
Through your worship, I'm curious to our CAO's thoughts on timing for how best to move this forward, if you have any initial. Sorry to put you on the spot there, Mr. President.
Sorry, but not sorry.
The business of government continues. I would have had first, second, and let the new council deal with third, but look, this is a council meeting. It's not a CAO meeting.
Yeah.
I would have just continued on as, this council can introduce as the original motion said and just have the new council finish it up.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, it's your decision. This is a council meeting. And I don't know the history of this file. And if there is extra work, then the new council can deal with it. There's strong arguments on both, to be honest. I'm not trying to be neutral on purpose, but there are strong arguments. But if it were me, the business of government continues regardless if there's an election.
Great. Councillor Ryan.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that when I think back to our first meeting, how there wasn't like a ton of, just awareness, and the risk of potentially having to have 2 public hearings is actually quite possible. And then that's more expensive for the taxpayer, slower for the developer. So like, even though it seems a bit drawn out, I think it actually is cleaner, hopefully.
All right, so one more comment and then I call a question on the
So
amendment.
why is the third reading on this agenda?
Third reading on this agenda, public hearings on this agenda.
Why is the public hearing? Now, is that something that the planning department should explain? Because to me, this gentleman or these people have been dying to make this happen for a long
Okay,
time.
Mr. Simon, comment.
Through your worship, to Councillor Elliott and to echo the comments of Mr. Parliament, when staff are bringing items forward, again, we're obviously aware that there's an election, but we keep things progressing as we would otherwise if the election were not happening. It is council's decision to choose whether or not these hearings should be held within their term or defer to after their term. Staff are going to make the recommendation to proceed as if we would as if there was no election that was coming up on the 15th.
Correct. All right,
If there was no election coming up on the 15th, you would have the public hearing on the 25th.
Through your worship, yes.
all right, let's call a question on the amendment. So the amendment is to delay the public hearing until after the new council is entrenched. Is that correct, Mr. Palmer? You're muted.
Yes, that's correct. Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. So we are going to call a question on that. So we're basically setting that into the future. So, and then we will call the question on the public hearing to be scheduled. So the amendment, all those in favor? Opposed? Note that this is passed, so Councillor Charlotte and Councillor Elliott are against the amendment. Rest of council are in favor. Now I'm going to call the question on the public hearing. So all those in favor of the public hearing?
Wait, I'm confused. I thought
The
this.
public hearing, so
We were just,
clarification, Councillor Palmer?
Well, I was just voting. I'm in favor.
Okay,
Sorry, I thought we were voting on delaying until the public hearing.
so
We did.
the first one we did,
we amended it. Now we're voting
On
on
the
the
original.
amended
the
motion.
amended motion, which is to have the public hearing, but after the new council's in place.
Okay,
Okay, is that correct, Ms. Floyd?
That's correct, your worship.
All right, so we're calling the question on the public hearing, amended public hearing.
We haven't voted in favor of the amendment.
You just did,
We're automatically disqualified, or like, I mean, we vote again.
yeah, no, you can vote either
Not
way.
the obvious here, but
Yeah, no.
I'm flush. Okay,
You voted against the amendment, you're voting for the public hearing.
okay.
All right,
I mean,
All right.
It's great to have a public hearing, but I want it in October, not December next year.
all right. So, voting on the amended motion to have the public hearing, that will be done after the new council is in place. All those in favor? Opposed? Note the motion is carried. Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to item 9C, wastewater treatment. So someone will put that motion on, Councillor Ryan.
that wastewater treatment facility upgrade phase 1 loan authorization bylaw number 2240 be adopted.
Seconder for the motion, please, Councillor Charlotte. Discussion on the motion. So just for clarification, so we went through the authorization alternate process. So basically the community has given us permission to move forward. We're adopting this. There is going to be a 30-day period before anything goes. And then at that point, there's a process, Ms. Floyd, to go through before we can borrow. Is that correct?
Yes, your worship, we need to get the approval of the inspector of municipalities. And then there's a whole process through the Ministry of Finance.
All right, great. All right, any further questions on the motion on the table? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item D, school road safety. Someone want to put that in, Councillor Ryan?
That school road safety project loan authorization bylaw number 2334 be adopted.
Seconder for the motion, Councillor Charlotte. Discussion on this motion. Same as the other one where we have a process to go through before we can borrow the money. Any questions or comments on the borrowing process? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. All right, moving on to staff reports. 11A, development permit 2022-013, 278 Highway 23 North. Mr. Simon, do you have any comments before I put the motion on the table?
Through your worship, this is again Ms. Comar's, our assistant planner's file, and she is here to answer any questions. She's been loading up the agenda for you guys today for her second time in council now, so very
Awesome.
excited.
All right, thank you, Ms. Comars. We will put the motion on the table and then I'll ask council if they have questions. Someone want to put 11A1 on for me, please? Councillor Burksell.
The development permit, DBP 2022-013 be issued for a new commercial building at 278 Highway 23 North as in the package.
Second for the motion, please. Councillor Charlotte. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Ryan.
Yeah, so in the report, it mentions that waste receptacles are compatible with Bear Smart design principles. And I was wondering if we could get some comment on whether that's Bear Proof specific, or is it just like,
I'll walk on the bin.
yeah, exactly.
All right.
And how robust in the OCP are those guidelines, I guess?
comment, Ms. Comars, regarding the trash bin? You're muted.
To the best of my knowledge, the applicants have worked with us to bring the garbage receptacles at the rear of the building into compliance. That is something that we can work with them further to ensure that it is of a higher standard. They've been really amicable to work with us with even the design of the building itself. So I can see them going the extra mile to make sure that those animals in the community are kept at a safer place. But the applicant has not indicated to a further degree what level of bear proof they will be.
Okay, that's great. Thanks. I would just suggest too, if they are looking for any input, that they consult with Bearware, because they really know their stuff and they've got great recommendations for what kind of bear smart solutions would actually be, actually bear proof, not just bear resistant.
That's perfect, good. All right, any other comments or questions?
Maybe just a question for Jackie. Are those metal bins that that the waste management companies use that are locked typically, are they bear proof?
I don't know. I think it depends on which type of bin. I'm not an expert, but some of them are and some of them aren't. So I think it depends.
If the welds are good and the lock is on,
Yeah, true.
then they are. And so I bring that up because a conservation officer has been diligent about walking down the alleys of our city and either giving warning tickets or making people well aware the lock needs to be on to be bear proof, right? And so depending on the type of bear and the type of product that is in there, they're pretty good. Are they going to be 100%? Well, I wouldn't put money on it, but by the same token, they're pretty good.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it just seems like they're bomb proof. You can get in there, you gotta.
Yeah, I guess it just becomes-
Once you and I get in there, we ain't getting out, but by the same
Yeah,
token.
just about that diligence piece, though. That's interesting to know. That's good.
Okay, good. Any other comments on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Item 11A2 regarding security. Someone want to put that, Councilor Brooksville?
That the owner provide a security for the due and proper completion of landscaping in the amount of 125% of the amount identified in the cost estimate to the city of Revelstoke as in the part.
Okay, seconder for that motion, please. Councilor Charlotte. Any discussion on that? That's regarding security for landscaping. Seeing no other comments, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Moving on to item 11B. KOA campground ownership model change. And so, Mr. Simon, this is yours or Ms. Comar's?
Through your worship, this is my report.
All right, good. So we'll put the motion on the table and then ask questions. Someone want to do that for me, please? Councilor Charlotte?
That the conversion of Lot B, Section 25, Township 23, Range 2, as in the package, to a cooperative interest ownership model in accordance with Section 6 of the Real Estate Development Marketing Act be endorsed.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councilor Ryan. Discussion on this motion. Councilor Ryan, and then I'll weigh in.
So I was curious what the current tax is that we get from this property and whether it would change, and if so, how?
Any comment on that, Mr. Simon? I know it's a campground. I'm assuming that there'll be some tax implications as it switches over to an ownership model, at least in some way. Is that not correct?
Through your worship, that is a interesting question. And certainly I will be the first to say that taxation and finance is not my area of expertise as a planner, but generally speaking, my understanding and working with the assessors at BC Assessment and poking and prodding them for some information is, generally speaking, the taxes are based on a variety of factors, zoning being one of the factors, the use that's occurring on the site being another factor, as well as all the infrastructure and buildings that are constructed on the subject property. So keep in mind, if I had to wager an educated guess on this, again, because I will note I'm not an expert assessor, and it really is something that's better suited for the Director of Finance or BC Assessment for that matter. But if I had to wager an educated guess, I would think that the taxes would be relatively the same, because the use on the site is not really changing. It's the users on the site that's changing, which taxes usually don't have a consideration for the users of the site. It's the use of the site.
All right, thank you for that clarification. Councillor Ryan, I'll come back to you.
Yeah, so just to follow up, so the use is, my understanding is that it's still, that this change would be more permanent resident than is currently there. So my thoughts is that there would be more of a burden on infrastructure. So I would expect taxation to go up, but you're saying that that's not right?
Well, it's currently a campground, both top and bottom.
Yeah.
They're deciding to take the bottom and do some sort of, where they sell the use of that space to people. They're not selling the space, but the use of.
Yes.
So people will be able to purchase the use of said campground space. So it's still being utilized by someone who's camping there. So because the business model has changed, but the use on the ground hasn't changed, so probably there's not going to be much change as far as taxation goes.
But in the report, they sort of state that their intention is to increase the, beautification of it or whatever, and upgrade, I guess, the facilities, and that it's going to have a higher occupancy rate than it currently has. So in my mind, higher occupancy means more.
Well, if they're not increasing the number of campgrounds and they're just increasing their occupancy, so they're paying their tax on the
Right.
number of spaces that are there
Gotcha.
now. So that's where the change will
Okay.
be.
Okay.
If they're going to beautify things, and if BC Assessment comes along and says, hey, we want to look at your property because you made it nice and pretty now, we're going to assess you at a higher value, and
Gotcha.
that's where the tax rate will increase.
Okay. Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Okay. Councillor,
So these are effectively RV lots
yeah,
for sale, and there's lots of examples of that on the highway. Drive to Noah's Ark on the highway, or Downey Loop, or all throughout the lower.
so the process, the plan is a little different than stratifying and buying your lot.
You're buying
It's
a-
buying the ability to be there. Not much different than, let's say, uses of property. I'm buying the use of that property. And then I have that for my use, but it's not changed the use of the overall product, right?
So a couple questions.
Yep.
Infrastructure, there's no sewer, it's a septic system?
They're putting in their own new septic system. Is that correct, Mr. Simon?
Through your worship, yes, that is correct. There's an existing septic, and my understanding is that the new owners have undertaken upgrades to that septic system.
So
Okay.
there's no strain
No
on
fees. Yeah.
our system. Regarding, if you wanted to set up a community, they're putting RVs onto these lots, these permanent co-shared ownership, this space that you own as a group. You're allowed to park your RV on it.
Correct.
Tiny homes on trailers sound like an RV in this case, right? So, to me, this makes such an obvious, if Adrian's looking for a place to put a tiny home community, here you go. And I don't know why we couldn't come up with something similar to this in other locations on the fringe of our town. And, but anyway, I just think it's an opportunity if you're looking at tiny homes and affordability and trying to find a way to get people housed.
Yeah, and so the motion on the table is about the ownership
Yeah.
model change for this particular thing. So, Councillor Ryan, did you have another question?
Yeah, so even though it's a campground now, nobody lives there permanently, is that correct?
No, there is a caretaker's space, and I believe that they have like a fifth wheel or a trailer that they stay in, but they're not there year-round.
Okay, so there's no risk of taking housing away from people.
No,
Great.
absolutely not.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
Councillor Charlotte.
And just to clarify, that this proposal is not talking about permanent residents.
I think you're buying, yeah.
The rules are,
Well, that's what we should address. Why wouldn't you allow permanent residents?
I think
Because
they
this
do.
is their ownership
I know.
program. And this is a whole thing. It's not about stratifying and buying the lot. It's about buying a share in the ownership program that gives you the ability to park your trailer there.
Yeah, and I would think people would live there.
And so they got to the point, I think if we look at their structure, it basically says somewhere in their structure that it's not gonna be permanent, and you're not gonna live there year round, so.
But it's not permanent because the facility can be moved, but there, I don't think, like in nothing that I read, was there any restriction on the number of nights they could stay there or anything like that? It's effectively
Okay.
permanent, which is fine.
Oh,
We need
yeah.
that. We need long-term.
Counselor Shore.
well, and just to put into that our housing needs are across quite a wide spectrum too. Like seasonal residency is still a big part of our community,
sure.
so this would serve part of that need. It's that mix of all the things, not one or the other, everything being the same
Yeah.
type of solution. So this is, I'm fully support, and I think this will be adding a good part to our mix.
Good. All right, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Nope. Counselor Brooks Hill is opposed. Balance of councils in favor. This motion is passed.
Spoke up.
Any re-
You want to state why you were not in favor? That's your choice. You don't have.
I could say why essentially we're all agreeing that it's going to be permanent people living there, but it's not set up for that at all. They're claiming that that's not what's going to be the case. They're saying they're going to police it. And in the report, it talks about how one of the problems would be if people live there permanently, like you're basically just going to create a giant slum out there. And that's
Well, are
what's
you saying
happening.
tiny homes generate, go to slums?
Well, you're confusing tiny homes. What Adrian's talking about is not homes on wheels. He's talking about smaller, like you're talking about tiny homes as things on wheels.
Well,
You're
actually,
conflating
I'm
two
talking
completely
both.
separate
There's Cedars
issues.
RV Park in Malaqua, and there's one halfway between it. Notice they say campsites, cabins, and RVs. And I'm just wondering why they can do it in the regional district, and we can't do it in our community.
Okay, so I'm going to stop right there because we're getting off track.
Oh, it's on track, Harry. It's all related to housing.
So the motion is passed.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm just curious why.
Do you want to explain any more, or are we?
No,
We're
it's
good. All right, we're gonna move on. Item 11C, development permit, 420 Downey Street, Provincial Rental Housing Corporation. Someone want to put this motion on the table for me? Councilor Brooks Hill.
The development permit DP 2020-017 be issued for form and character for the construction of a multi-unit mixed-use building and 5 row houses at 420 Downey Street as.
Okay, seconder for that motion. Councilor Elliott. Discussion on the motion. This is for our BC housing plan on our school property. Any comments or questions for Mr. Simon? Councilor Ryan.
Just a comment that I'm so thrilled to see that they included underground parking, which I know was a recommendation from a lot of members of the community to maximize the utilization of that lot. And really also excited to see the variety of housing that will be included. Because this is just such a perfect example of some of the types of housing that we are missing. So this is just very exciting.
Okay. Any comments, Mr. Simon?
Through your worship, no major comments. There's been obviously more details that have been fleshed out at development permit stage with respect to design. And again, staff are very keen and eager to continue working with the proponent to get this project in the ground as quickly as possible. And as stated in the report, the proposal does comply with all applicable development permit area guidelines as established in the most recent version of the official community plan.
Great, appreciate that. All right, any further comments from council? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried. Item C2, please. Someone put that on. Councilor Brooks Hill.
That the owner provide a security for the due and proper completion of landscaping in the amount of 125% of the amount identified in the cost estimate. As in the package, and noting Section A, a letter of indemnity from BC Housing may be accepted as an acceptable form of security.
All right, second for the motion, please. Councillor Rind. Any further discussion on this motion? Councillor Elliott.
We've been sort of been begging for this to happen. And this sounds to me like a hurdle that they have to overcome. Why put that in there? If they're, I'm just baffled why they need to consider that.
Which
The 125% of the landscaping fee. Is
I
it just
believe
an
that's in our bylaw, but
Is
Mr.
it-
Simon, I'll ask for clarification.
Please.
Through your worship, this is very typical for all developments where there is a landscaping component to make sure that the works do get complete. However, I do just want to verify as well that this has been vetted and reviewed with BC Housing. And one of the differences that you're going to see for this project with respect to the required landscape security compared to other projects, for instance, the other one that you just saw on Highway 23, is that Part A, that a letter of indemnity from BC Housing may be accepted as an acceptable form of security. So that's really key for this one. So BC Housing has no issues with that in our discussions with them. And that's typically what they provide for these projects. They indemnify the city for any landscaping requirements that are going to be occurring on site. And that basically allows them to proceed with just that letter of indemnity without having to provide the actual security itself.
Yeah, and maybe that's the discussion we need to have. I mean, most developers, the 125% commitment up front takes away from their ability to build. So that's a bigger discussion. Is that what we want to do? Now, that's a decision as council. You have to say, do we need housing? Are we creating obstacles? Can we take them out? And that's what you need to look at.
Appreciate the comment. Thank you. All right, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Item 11D, Heritage Management Plan. Councillor Ryan.
The next steps for the Heritage Management Plan project be as follows. Complete the Heritage Management Plan document as outlined in the proposal that accompanied the city's grant application to the Heritage BC through the Columbia Basin Trust. 2, complete a final draft of the Heritage Management Plan document. And 3, report back to council regarding the final draft of the Heritage Management Plan document for consideration.
Seconder for the motion, Councillor Charlotte. And Councillor Ryan, you were on your way to an auctioneer. Doing well. Any further comments from council regarding the Heritage Management Plan or questions? Ms. Hartley and Ms. Cook, we see you two on here. Do you have any comments regarding this before we go further?
Yes, Your Worship. We have Denise Cook, who is our Heritage Planner and lead consultant on the Heritage Management Plan, that she's assisting and advising staff and the Heritage Advisory Planning Commission on the Heritage Management Plan project. And we have just completed part of the first stage, which is the community engagement. And Denise does have a short presentation for council today on the community engagement summary, which is the report in front of you. And then we do have this presentation. So I'll leave it to Denise, and I'll just share my screen and go through the slides for Denise as she leads the presentation.
Thank you. Ms. Cook, welcome.
Thank you very much. Hello, Your Worship and members of council. I'm Denise Cook, and I'm a Heritage Conservation Planner assisting city staff and the Heritage Advisory Committee in preparing Revelstoke's Heritage Management Plan. And I'm pleased to be here today to present the initial findings of the community engagement for the project. Next, please. Next. Oh, thanks. Revelstoke has a strong history of heritage conservation, but like any program, it can and should evolve and change over time. The heritage planning process will examine and update Revelstoke's current heritage planning initiatives and programs, update its heritage planning documentation to meet best practices, re-examine the Revelstoke Station Heritage Conservation Area boundary, and review current design guidelines and other aspects of the city's heritage program. The process also supports the Heritage Advisory Commission by building capacity around knowledge and understanding of heritage legislation. The management plan will bring a consistent approach to heritage conservation in Revelstoke and provide a roadmap to apply current best practices in heritage conservation, creating a heritage program that considers all of Revelstoke's heritage values. These values are drawn from the community through a process of community engagement. Next, please, Erica. The community engagement was undertaken as a first step in determining what the community values about the city, places that are important to its heritage, and ideas about the successful implementation of a heritage program. Staff and the Heritage Advisory Commission worked together to prepare a values-focused community engagement plan. This included a questionnaire, which was put online at Revelstoke, with paper surveys available at various public locations, and a drop-in community workshop. It also included a short questionnaire that was specifically designed to document the opportunities and challenges for property owners in the Revelstoke Station Heritage Conservation Area. As the responses and information are synthesized, we'll be noting any gaps and potentially identifying people or groups to speak to individually if that's required. We would also undertake further engagement around design guidelines, review, or other issues as needed. These activities were designed to draw out the values people hold for heritage in the community, what gives Revelstoke its unique character, and ways in which the city and the community can work together to conserve heritage. The community questionnaire consisted of 20 questions overall, with 53 online responses and 7 paper questionnaires submitted. The workshop was held at the Museum and Archives, with 22 people attending to respond to presentation boards, complete a mapping exercise, and discuss heritage. The museum provided a historical slideshow and refreshments. The Heritage Conservation Area Property Owner Questionnaire had 4 questions overall and had 33 responses. Creating the plan requires an understanding of a wide range of values held by the community. These values can relate to the built environment, natural heritage, intangible heritage features such as community events and local knowledge, industrial features, streetscapes, and anything else the community finds has value. To facilitate this, the questionnaire and workshop were designed to be values-based, and so included both qualitative and quantitative questions. This approach allows the community to clearly articulate why heritage places matter and ensures confidence that identified heritage values remain for present and future generations. It also ensures that there's consideration of the community's responses when developing heritage policy and strategies. I'll now quickly go through some of the representative responses. Association with Revelstoke. This question had a wide range of responses. Some people have had family here since the 1920s, many in the 20 to 30 so year range, and several newcomers. Some were born and raised here, others came for work or business, and others sought a different lifestyle. With regard to the neighborhood question, this was designed to articulate the character of Revelstoke's different neighborhoods so it can be considered during future changes. Many qualities were described, including semi-rural character, spectacular views, patterns of streetscapes, walkability, and proximity to downtown and trails. Next slide, please, Erica. This is the question around the importance of heritage. And as you can see, the overwhelming response was that the conservation of Revelstoke's heritage places is very important. There were many reasons given for this, such as its contribution to the city's uniqueness, learning from the past to address the future, how it adds richness to the community, how it maintains the unique look and feel of the city, and how it supports sustainability. Next slide, please, Erica. This question involved ideas around events, programs, and initiatives, and it's evident that Revelstoke's residents greatly value the many events and programs that the city offers. Some of those mentioned include Grizzly Plaza music evenings, the various festivals, environmental conservation activities, and there were also ideas about renovating homes for staff housing and initiating a heritage plaque program. When asked what was of value about the community's heritage and character, the sense of community, outdoor lifestyle, character, scenery, and community spirit were frequently mentioned. Regarding building structures and infrastructure, responses to this question varied, but most appreciated Revelstoke's parks and green space, and trails were mentioned often, as was the city's built heritage. There was also an appreciation that previous city councils chose to preserve the historic downtown architecture. Next slide, please, Erica. Regarding the aspects of history and heritage, respondents were given a list of 12 choices to rank in terms of their importance. The top 3 chosen were landscapes, significant natural features such as plants, trees, and wildlife, and thirdly, climate, lakes, and rivers. But it's important that each of the 12 received a ranking, so it was felt that all of them had a role to play. Regarding the Heritage Register, this question was designed to understand how many people were aware of the Heritage Register, which is a key planning tool for heritage, and how it could be promoted. It showed that almost half of respondents were aware of the register. Top ranked as ways to learn more about it include newspaper articles, a city heritage webpage, the museum and archives, and the public library. Regarding significant places and features, there was a wide range and variety of places and features identified. These range from significant buildings to landscapes, the Columbia River, parks, streetscapes, all of this illustrating that respondents appreciated the broad and inclusive nature of the community's heritage. With regard to current planning work and heritage tools, respondents indicated that they were somewhat knowledgeable about the city's heritage planning work and gave suggestions about how it could become more widely known, such as a direct link on the city's website, newspapers, engaging with partners, and workshops with key staff and stakeholders. Next slide, please, Erica. With regard to heritage and community planning, 80% of respondents felt that considering heritage in all aspects of community planning, such as short and long-term planning, public realm projects, engineering works, parks, and recreation planning is important. Some commented on the need for knowledgeable staff, clarity of heritage processes, and assurance that responsibility for the heritage program would continue amidst staff changes. Regarding challenges for the heritage property owners, some of the key points raised in their questionnaire by owners in the HCA are as follows, but I just want to note that many also included support for the HCA and the value of heritage in general. So their key points were around the clarity and transparency around heritage requirements and processes, making heritage house renovation less of a challenge, streamlining the heritage alteration process, financial or insurance challenges, the availability of heritage technical skills to complete renovations or rehabilitations, lack of enforcement of existing bylaws, and the need for support for residents association to advocate for the HCA. Another issue that came up often was the issue of street parking and garages raised as an issue to consider. Next slide, please, Erica. This is a representative list of what community members identified it as aspects of Revelstoke that make it the place it is today. One comment noted that the vibe of Revelstoke is important and found in a combination of heritage, history, environment, community values, and people who care. Next slide, please, Erica. The engagement results will be integrated into the development of the Heritage Management Plan in each of its 3 core parts. Part 1, historical context, themes, and vision. Part 2, identifying heritage places. And Part 3, heritage management planning. Essentially, the results of the community engagement will build on the solid base of heritage conservation work in the past, along with current best practices to formulate policy, strategies, and tools that work specifically for the city. Next slide, please, Erica. The next steps will be the completion of a draft heritage management plan for review and a report back to council for consideration. Currently, we're at the what we've heard stage. So next up will be the thematic framework and vision, the heritage conservation area review and policy development, a draft plan, and finally a community open house. The Heritage Advisory Commission will be fully involved throughout. Next slide, please. And this concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Ms. Cook. Any comments or questions for Ms. Cook regarding her presentation? Councillor Lane.
Denise, just on the number of participants in the committee or the information that you gathered, there were 53 online, 7 actually completed papers on the, and then there there was a 33 that came from another survey or something. I'm wondering whether it's the same people that sort of participate all the time or provide that information. Are those engaged people formulating our perception for our city? And that's my worry. I'm all for heritage. I mean, for me, I think it's very, very, very important that we celebrate where we've come from. But I'm just wondering, is our future dictated by our past? Or are people who love the past and not looking forward?
Through your worship, just a comment on that. When we're engaging with the community around heritage, we try to cast as wide a net as possible. And so that's why there's a provision here for further engagement, that if we find that we haven't heard from a particular group that should be spoken to, we'll certainly do that. It's also that heritage conservation doesn't ever cement things in the past. It's a forward-looking profession, and a forward-looking program is what I'm hoping that you will have in Revelstoke.
No, I just, well, you know, I guess ultimately, I mean, I think we need to get some standards from the heritage thing that we need to transfer to the way we build. If we want to celebrate the heritage, we need some definitions that go into the future. If this is the image we want to present to the world and grow with it, then we need concrete sort of implementations that to lay it all out. So maybe that's what I'm looking for, some standards or some definitions that we need to put into the community.
Further comment, Ms. Cook?
Yes, that will absolutely be part of the plan. Certainly up-to-date guidance and standards and processes to follow so that it's clear and everything will meet current best practices in the heritage profession.
And then the other thing is that, you know, I do know some people who are in the heritage conservative area, and the concerns that you brought out are very, very valid. They, you know, difficult to get clarity on what to build, or hang-ups on making amendments or improving things. And it's fine to have this heritage concept, but we have to live in today's world. And you have to be able to make amendments or enhance things, but without you know, the same building standards that you did 100 years ago are not in place, or you can't even find any or a tradesperson to do that these days. It's a challenge.
All right, thank you for that comment, Councilor Ryan.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I just thank Denise for all the work on this. I've developed a lot of respect and appreciation for preserving and promoting community's heritage from my role on the museum board. And it's just been a huge privilege to sit among some of the most passionate, knowledgeable people in the community as they kind of discuss how to share that Revelstoke story. And I think to your point, Rob, what I've seen at least at the museum board is they're often thinking of new ways to share the history and story in ways that are more modern. So I think that plan plays into this plan. It's like, how can you share the story of the past in modern ways with new members of the community, with kids, with all different kinds of groups. And it's not just, you know, you're walking the museum and you read a board. It's like there's really engaging ways that they share that story. And it's just really great to see this heritage management plan come together, and very excellent that it's also largely grant funded. So yeah, thanks a lot, Denise. I think what you'd mentioned about the vibe of the community is exactly what this is looking to preserve, and that's awesome.
Great, appreciate that. Any further comments from council?
I agree 100%. If there's a beautiful old building, I would do my best to preserve it. I just think that historically Revelstoke has gotten rid of most of its old heritage. We've got a few, but most of you go to Fernie or all these other, you go to Coleman or all these coal towns in Elf Valley, they've got more unique buildings left from the past where we have not preserved them. And I would make sure whatever we have left, make sure we do preserve them. But I just be aware that we haven't done a good job at this point preserving our past.
Councillor Charlotte. I was gonna make a comment about the preservation in Malacca right now.
I'm gonna rejuvenate it.
Thank you, Worship. And I think just a comment that I think our council's done quite a bit of work to simplify that language. So the OCP being its own big project, but also updating our zoning bylaws. I remember seeing the descriptions of the various different features of heritage homes and the traditional build that we did see more of in Revelstoke in the past has now been very much like clarified in simpler language with images and simple descriptions. I'm hoping we see the same with the heritage management plan. That was what was hinted at in that zoning bylaw update, was that we would see more clear language like that to make it easier for developers and for renovations and homes. That going forward, hopefully we will not see those same hangups as we have in the past. I'm heartened to see in your presentation, Ms. Cook, thank you very much for that, about that focus on simplifying things in order to preserve heritage rather than overly complicated, to set some clear boundaries to make it more attainable. So thank you.
All right, if there's no other comments, I will call the question on the motion on the table. Councillor Elliott.
Just on the older buildings, we're at a conflict because we're trying to resolve efficiency, green, and make them energy efficient and do all the lighting. So that sometimes is at odds with preserving the old look, and it becomes very expensive to do both. So just in our thinking and our evaluating when someone comes in for a permit to say they want to upgrade their home to make it more energy efficient, sometimes it may conflict with the heritage, just so you're aware.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see that there are ways around that, but they're all costly. And so we just need to be cognizant of that sort of thing. All right, all those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried. Thank you, Ms. Cook. Ms. Hartling, appreciate your work on heritage plan or management plan. Thank you. All right.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. We're going to move on to 13A, communications, letter regarding Revelstoke Housing Action Plan from Ms. Zacharias. Anyone want to have any comment on that? Go ahead.
Yeah, it was surprising to see that Revelstoke wasn't on that list of regions for the speculation tax. I'm wondering if at UBC there's any discussion around that, bringing that to the province's attention.
So we're having discussions with all kinds of people, whether it's people that are in those areas, Kelowna and whatnot, to see if there's been any value to that. And then, of course, that sort of thing, we see the opposite side where developers are saying, the speculation tax has been a hindrance to us to build. So it's going to be an ongoing conversation that was not discussed in my awareness at UBC in any public meetings.
Okay. The other comment that I just wanted to make is that I agree with Ms. Zacharias in the sense that all levels of government really do have a role in coming together. And I think not acknowledging that is the wrong approach here. It's an all hands on deck.
Appreciate that comment. And so for our role, or my comment with this is we see what she's put, and if it came across that I'm not interested in housing, I look at it and say we don't need provincial government to download onto us to look after it. We need to work with the provincial government, with all bodies, and also with the private sector to deal with housing. And I think we've seen what we've done over the last 4 years is integrated some of that stuff, but there's more work to be done. And so I agree.
I think
Councillor.
further to that, municipal government's role in the housing game is to get rid of barriers, as you pointed out in your comments in the paper, to actually get involved in developing, financing, giving land and all this sort of, it gets municipal government off track. And we had enough time to get infrastructure right and roads and safety. Those are our immediate concerns and stuff that we can engage in. But to get into the housing game at any government, you're asking for trouble. Because I've never seen any engagement I've seen from the government is not productive, is not what you would do as if you own the same business.
But we can actually direct housing in different ways where there's either associations or housing authorities or private sector, and we support that in whatever capacity we can, but we get out of their way and let them drive the bus to do that sort of thing. And then work with the provincial government for land to assist in building those things. I don't think we can ever say the government can't get involved. It's how we get involved. And the important part here is to make sure that if we're going to get involved, that we're doing it in a way that we actually will start the process, and then we have others take over who are experts in their field to make sure that works for community-wide things. I think that's the key. So I feel that we're heading in that direction in some way as we move forward. Councillor Ryan.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think how we get involved is really important because you can't just, like, I agree with you that you need to remove barriers. But if it's not directed, you just get a lot of people building big fancy homes, and you know what I mean? Like, you quickly get into the, I don't know, like some of those communities in the US, and nobody here wants that, right? Like, you have to have regulations,
I think.
incentives in the right place.
Yeah, exactly. If you, I would say, as long as you define what you want, what's needed in our community are 800-900 square 2-bedroom places,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah,
if you've laid that out, get everything out of the way so that can be built.
totally.
And provide some incentives
Yes,
for the private people to get involved, or it makes sense for them to do it. 'Cause
Yes.
right now, all it makes sense is to build a massive R1 home on a big lot, because it's the most profitable,
right.
right? So we should be finding ways to make it possible to do other things.
Mhm.
Okay, all right. Any further comment on that letter? Seeing none, I'm going to move on. Advisory Planning Commission meeting minutes, September 20th. Any comments on those? Seeing none, I'm going to move on to questions from the press. So we have one member of the press here. No comment. Thank you. Ms. Floyd, any other comments or questions from the press?
No, Your Worship.
All right. I am going to go and ask for the fact that we move in camera pursuant to section 90.1C of the community charter. Someone want to make that motion? Councillor Brooks Hill, Councillor Chalette, all in favor? Motion's carried. We'll take a 5-minute break and go in camera. And thank you, staff. Appreciate you being here today. And Ms.